Alright guys, today we're going to talk about square roots and what a square root means, okay? Now, if you've got a number like they're talking about p times p, what's another way of saying that? P squared, good. Okay? So now the square root of p squared is going to be, they're asking what times what is p squared?
3 times p?
No, yeah, so just say p, okay? So like if we have the number 4, what times what equals 4? 2. So the square root means what times what equals that number that's under the square root. You see that? So what times what's 4? 2. So what's the square root of 4? Now you don't say 2 times 2, you just say 2. You see that? Okay, so what's the square root of 36? 6. What's the square root of 81? 9. So let's read what's up here. Numbers that can be written as p times p, where p is an integer, are called perfect squares. Okay? So a perfect square is 4 because it can be written as 2 times 2, right? Now, if you've got like, y'all put in your calculators 4.3 and then push the square root button. So the square root of 4.3 is going to be 2.07 right? Okay? So this isn't a perfect square because it's not an integer. This is a rational number, remember? Okay? For it to be a perfect square, the answer would have to be 2 integers like this. Okay? So is 4.3 a perfect square? No, but 4 is, isn't it? Okay? And then they got some examples up there. Alright, up here on the board are some basic rules dealing with square roots. Okay? Now, I want to read this second sentence. Notice that 36 is the same thing as what? 6 times 6. Right? And 36 is the same thing as negative 6 times negative 6. Why is it negative 6 times negative 6?
Because negative times negative is a positive.
Negative times a negative is a positive. Good, Reggie. So both 6 and negative 6 are the square root of what?
36.
So what's the square root of 4?
2.
2 and what?
Negative 2.
2 and negative 2. What that means is 2 times 2 equals what?
4.
And negative 2 times negative 2 equals what? So you have 2 square roots of each number, the positive and the negative. Now it says right here the positive square root is always called the principal square root. Okay, the principal, positive. Now this symbol right here means what? It's the radical sign. And that radical sign on a number means find the square root. Okay? Now, they say that this is the positive way you do it. The square root of 36 is 6. The way you do the negative square root is a negative out in front. So you find the square root of 36 and then you tell it that it's negative. What about this one? The square root of 49 is what?
7 and negative 7.
Okay, yeah, this is 7. And then the negative square root of 49 is what? Negative 7. So your answer is negative 7 and 7. Alright, so you want to know what the square root of 676 is. So we found out that 26 times 26 equals 676. So the square root equals 26, but we also know that negative 26 times negative 26 equals 676, so you need negative 26 also. So these are your 2 answers for the square root of 676 right here. Now on this, we have a square root and a fraction. This is going to be the same thing as the square root of 25 over the square root of 121, and the negative goes on top, of course. Tell me the square root of 25. So let's just say 5 over what? 11, and we'll say it's negative from the negative sign. Now the other way you can do it would be negative 5 over negative 11, which is just positive and positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then you put your negative from right here out there. So you just have one answer on this. Negative 5 over 11. Alright, so on this one, it's the same thing as the square root of 9 over the square root of 25. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 25 is 5, so your answer is 3 over 5. An equation. In this equation, they have x squared equals 64. And since it's an equation, our job is to get the variable by itself. Right? What's the variable? So we've got to get it by itself. Now let me ask you this. X squared is the same thing as what? X squared is also what? X times x. And 64 is the same thing as what? 8 times 8, right? So what we really have is x times x equals 8 times 8, right? Now what did we find out earlier, like the square root? What's the square root of 2 times 2? No. This is the same thing as the square root of 4. What's the square root of 4? 2. So what's the square root of 2 times 2? 2. Okay? So now I ask you, what's the square root of x times x? X. And what's the square root of 8 times 8? 8. So when you want to solve an equation where it's squared, you do the opposite, which is to take the square root. So now I want you to write this down. The opposite of squared is to take the square root, and the opposite of square root is to square. Alright, so we want to solve this equation. X squared equals 5.76. To solve this, I do what?
Get the variable.
No, you have to get the variable by itself. I have to do what?
It's not 8.
No. Take the square root of both sides. Remember what we just talked about? The opposite of something being squared is to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 5.76 is 2.2?
2.4.
2.4. And so you got x by itself, didn't you? What about here? What do I do? Take the square root, say it, of both sides. So you take the square root of x squared, you get x. Take the square root of 9, it's 3. Take the square root of 16, it's 4. So 4. So x equals 3 over 4. So here we've got the square root of 3.61, and we put it in our calculator, and we got 1.9 and negative 1.9. And the reason those are the answers are because 1.9 times 1.9 equals 3.61, and negative 1.9 times negative 1.9 equals 3.61, because the negative times the negative is positive. So guys, today we learned how to find the square root of a normal, and what do we call it whenever it was even, like square root of 4 is 2, what do we call that?
Perfect.
Perfect square. We found how to find the square root of a fraction, and then we found how to find the square root of a rational number like 3.61.